I will share my screen. And I will basically, move us through this tool that we've been working on. So this is something called a Jupyter Notebook. This is a data analysis tool. It's a website that you can visit. Anyone with a Google account can log in and actually run this, but even without a Google account, you can actually just see what it does. And we do have instructions here on how to run the notebook. It's fairly straightforward. You are essentially pressing play to run a cell of code that analyzes data and returns an output for you to view. So the first, as you can see, a notebook consists of both cells of text. So this is text here that explains kind of what's going on at this stage, and cells of code, such as this one right here in black, that actually execute code that analyze the data and return an output. So to run this notebook, we're pressing play. And this particular cell brings in code from elsewhere that we've written to help us do some of the calculations later on. Now for this cumulative impacts analysis tool, we start by bringing in some information from the toxic release inventory, TRI, that tells us a little bit about the chemicals on that are listed on TRI, and also what health systems, body systems they're known to, or believed, estimated to affect. So that'll become useful for us later. And I'm not running each cell right now in this demo because I've already run them just to make sure things go smoothly, but we can come back and do that later. And zoom in on different places if we like. So in this cell, we actually pull up the 2022 TRI data, which is the latest reporting year, in support of looking at, okay, what are the places, specifically zip codes, that have the most different kinds of chemicals, air pollutants in particular, being released in that zip code. And so we summarize that information and chart it out here. So these are the top 20 zip codes in terms of the number of different kinds of air pollutants reported to TRI from facilities in that zip code. So you can see in some zip codes, we have upwards of over 175 different air pollutants. We summarize that also by counties in the next step. So zip codes are kind of arbitrary units of analysis. Counties may be a bit more relevant. I know we have folks from Adams County, Colorado here today, so that might be relevant to them. And indeed, that's a nationwide analysis. We might be interested in focusing in on a specific place. So in the next set of cells, we allow folks to choose, okay, I'm coming from Colorado, I'm interested in Adams County, what do things look like there? So here we get historical records from the TRI dating back to 2013 to look specifically at what's going on in Adams County. And so these are all the reports made to Adams County facilities over the past 10 years. We summarize those year by year here and chart that out so you can see just the number of different chemical or air pollutants has risen and fallen over the past 10 years. And we look at the facilities behind that. We can see here Clean Harbors, actually the most different kinds of air pollutants. Suncor, I know, is an important facility in the county. That's number 2 here in terms of number of different air pollutants, as well as a Phillips 66 refinery. So we might look at the different zip codes within the county. Okay, so we have that here, and maybe just a map. A map is a better way of looking at this information. So, I know the Clean Harbors facility is out in the eastern part of the county there, with the Suncor refinery more in the center of the county or closer to the Denver part of the county. Of course, we're interested in potential health effects from these air pollutants. So we use that information we've loaded earlier to understand, well, what are the air pollutants, the chemicals that are known to affect the most body systems? So neurological, cardiovascular, developmental, whatever the body system might be. And we see that for every year, here in Adams County, there's at least one air pollutant that is known to affect 6 different body systems. And if we look more closely, we see that that's lead or lead compounds or tetrachloroethylene or PCE. And we can look at which specific body systems it's estimated are known to affect. Now, of course, these are only air pollutants that we're looking at right here, and only those reported to TRI. We know there are other important ones, like the criteria air pollutants. And we can draw, and of course, we want to understand the context in which these air pollutants are being released and reported. So we can actually draw in other data sets to make a little bit more sense of that. So we can draw on the CDC's Environmental Justice Index here and look at some of their measures of health, of disease prevalence, which is what we do here in this map. We look at essentially for each census tract within the county and actually a bit beyond the county, how many of these different diseases, including diabetes, asthma, cancer, do we see especially high rates of compared to other census tracts in the US? And I'm happy to go through a bit more about what these colors mean as we get into it. Essentially, the darker shade of color here, the more number of different diseases that census tract has an especially high rate of prevalence of. Like I said, we might want to look at particulate matter here. We can do that by drawing on EDGI's screen, which includes a variety of different social, environmental, and public health measures. Here in particular, we look at particulate matter 2.5 levels and the percentile for each census tract. So comparing it to other census tracts in the country, we can see that many of those in the Adams County area are, we look at the legend here, have exceptionally higher levels of particulate matter than other census tracts throughout the country. And finally, looking at CEQ's CGIS tool to look a little bit more closely at other measures, including here, we look at particulate matter from diesel exhaust, and again, looking at how each census tract compares to others in the US. Now, it's really important to us at EDGI and EU to not just sort of look at these sort of outcomes, but to really understand what might be driving them. So we also try to explore or name, who's responsible for some of those releases that we looked at earlier. So we look again here at those 3 different pollutants that we saw were some of the most toxic, you could say, lead compounds, and PCE. And we look at the facilities over the years that have reported releasing them. So, if we look at Queen Harbor's, both lead and lead compounds, Suncor, both lead compounds and PCE. And that pattern tends to hold true if we look at this over the past 10 years, with some exceptions here and there. But of course, facility names don't really tell us about who might own those facilities. We do actually have information about corporate owners within TRI. It's not complete by any means, but facilities do report parent owner information. And so we can summarize that as well. So we see here that for all facilities in Adams County reporting to TRI, Brannan Sand and Gravel owns 6 of those facilities. Land Lakes owns a couple of Purina mills, I believe. This isn't perfect. We see Quick Creek showing up here twice, but it's a first step. And finally, here we go even one step further to try to map out where those parent companies are. And there's a lot of challenges to this kind of analysis, but just looking at some of these parent companies, where they're located or headquartered, we see that really dispersed around the country. And so we might want to save this by